The ideas, procedures, and suggestions contained within this podcast are not intended as a substitute for consulting with a medical professional. All matters regarding your health and fitness require medical consultation and supervision. Welcome to the Warrior Wellness Podcast, a podcast for military members, veterans, and first responders focusing on fitness, health, nutrition, and biohacking. Our mission with this podcast is to introduce America's heroes to lifestyle habits and hacks that will help them live healthier, happier lives, and in turn, be fit enough to continue their support of their communities and country.
Well, thank you so much, Stephen Abbey, for coming on the Warrior Wellness Podcast. I'm excited to talk to you about all things supplements and your awesome company, SOS Nutrients. I'm a huge advocate for supplementation. We'll talk about the reasons why it's necessary to supplement because you're the expert in those things. And obviously there's a reason why you created supplements. So let's just dive right in. So your company, SOS Nutrients, obviously there's a lot of supplements out there. We're all familiar with all of these supplement companies and these stores around. And it seems to be pretty popular. I mean, you can basically go to any box store nowadays and get supplements. And if you're just listening, you're not seeing me do quotes around that because we'll talk about why the quotes are there. So, but what inspired you to get into creating your own supplement line?
Well, I had several different medical issues almost 30 years ago. Psoriasis, I had reactive hypoglycemia, I had low energy. I was just really struggling. I was really not doing well. And the medical path that I was choosing was not meeting what I was wanting to. Like psoriasis, they gave me methotrexate, which is a chemotherapy drug. And I had to have a liver biopsy for it because it was really bad psoriasis. And amongst other things. And it was like the worst experience of my life having that liver biopsy. It was just very painful. There was like a giant needle that gets pushed between your ribs and takes a chunk out of your liver to be able to evaluate it because it can kill you if you do it and it goes badly. So I decided to look at other routes. And while I started looking, I was just fascinated with all the studies that are out there. So I first figured out what was going on for myself and came with a direction, but then started looking at all these other things for heart disease, cancer, autoimmune conditions. And I was just fascinated with what I was finding, and it's not being translated into the people that have these diseases or trying to prevent these diseases are not being given that information. And yet that is in all of these studies. And then there were several friends of mine that got very sick, and I was helping them at the last months of their life. And the last person that had this was a really good friend of mine, Andra. And it was devastating because one, I couldn't get her a really good whole food form nutrition. There were synthetics, and in a comprehensive way. And I was just really frustrated. And her disease, in this case, cancer, I thought was very preventable. And I mean, it's not perfectly preventable, but a lot of these things are very preventable. And so when she died, I just decided I'm going to make something because this is ridiculous and put it out on the market. And so that's why I founded SOS Nutrients.
Yeah. And I'm so sorry about that. So sorry for your losses. And that is crazy frustrating. I have that kind of a similar story to yours, finding nutritional interventions for my own medical struggles where the traditional medical system was failing me. And it is extremely frustrating when you see other people suffering, especially with preventable types of conditions, and they're not being given the information about nutritional interventions that might be very helpful to their condition. Maybe not a cure, quote unquote, but at least helping manage the symptoms or reducing their symptoms, or in some cases, like type 2 diabetes, which is a lifestyle based chronic disease, it could even reverse, the course of the disease. And you mentioned a word synthetic. So let's go there since you mentioned it. And the people listening may not know what that means. So you mentioned synthetic supplements. So what does that mean? And why is that so important to pay attention to here in the world of supplementation?
Well, synthetic it's made in a lab, and it's not made by nature. It's not made by a natural process. It's made by a lab. So I'll give you an example of something. Ascorbic acid or vitamin C. Ascorbic acid is the name when it's manufactured, is the name, right? So it used to be manufactured at a plant in New Jersey, and 90% of the world's supply was made out there. And that's all moved over to China. Now 95% of the world's supply is made in China. And it's only a couple of different labs over there that make it in the main way that it is made. There are a couple of different ways, but the main way is you take high fructose corn syrup, you put it under incredible pressure, incredible heat. You then do an acetone wash, and then you neutralize it with hydrochloric acid. And in the end, you have a molecule that is chemically identical to what you find in nature. But it will not even cure scurvy, which is the deficiency disease for vitamin C, because it doesn't have any vitamin activity unless it has all the bioflavonoids and cofactors and all these other things to use it. So the body doesn't know what to do with it. And so it operates very differently. It doesn't mean that it can't have benefit. It's being used currently with a lot of places where they inject it in ginormous amounts into your veins. So it bypasses the normal route to get into your body. And it's used as a drug, right? Where it creates hydrogen peroxide on the site of cancer. I shouldn't go into this deep, but bottom line is the way they do it is they actually put a plasma that increases the oxygen level of the blood, and then they inject it. This is being used clearly as a drug. This is not the way to get your nutrition. Very different sort of thing. And so to me, synthetics can have a value, but in very unique sort of almost drug-like ways of going, as opposed to as a way of getting an optimal nutrition.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, and I've never thought of it that way. I think it makes perfect sense. That totally makes sense. So, in understanding all that, now looking at what is the alternative? So we know that a lot of these supplements are being created kind of synthetically, and they're isolated and they're not really effective in that form. What would be the form that would be the most beneficial if somebody's going to be taking supplements?
So there are supplements for vitamin C on the market, which would be considered whole form. So that comes from acerola cherry powder, camu, amla. Amla is Indian gooseberries. And those are three of the highest forms, or can be, where you get real amounts of vitamin C. And so, acerola cherry, which is in my product, I have a freeze-dried organic version that's in there, and it's 18% vitamin C by weight. And it's just incredible amount. Like, that's just not normal. Neither is camu and amla powder. They're all three just incredibly high levels. So that's like, 20 times or 50 times what an orange is, just to give you an example. It's like fantastic nutrition. But it has all the cofactors there to utilize in a normal way. And it was grown out of the ground in nature. Your body knows how to use it. And it's a gentle way of getting vitamin C, as opposed to ascorbic acid in the way that I manufacture that I just described. And if you're looking at like calcium ascorbate or liposomal vitamin C, all of that has a base of ascorbic acid. So they're all synthetic.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. And here's the big question. I'm sure you get a lot, and I'm sure you've answered it probably thousands of times, but we'll answer it again here, because that's probably the number one thing people are thinking to themselves, listening to this podcast is, well, why do I have to supplement if I'm just eating healthy?
Well, so there are a whole bunch of reasons for that. One, most people aren't eating healthy, and most people aren't eating nearly as healthy as they think. So let me give you an example of that. So there was a study done on the major components of the American diet, and broken down by category. So 42% of the calories in the American diet were from refined fats and sugars, right? Then you had 26% were from meat and dairy and eggs. 20% were refined grains. 12% were whole plant foods, right? So that was the breakdown. And if you look at, say, processed grains, excuse me, and the fats and sugars, that made up 62% of the American diet. So that essentially has no nutrition. It has calories. Those components have a lot of calories, but it has almost no nutrition. So let's start there, that most Americans aren't getting it. Then if you look at it broken down by components even further, so 96% of Americans don't get enough of the green leafy vegetables as put out by the recommended amount. Then you have orange vegetables. Only 2% of Americans get that. 4% get enough beans. 1% get enough whole grains. Okay, I've made my point. Basically, we're not eating whole plant foods, right? And that's where we're getting so many of those micronutrients that we need. So yes, you can do it. It's just not easy to do. You need to really concentrate on getting a much bigger amount from whole plant foods. And then you need to vary it, and specific things aren't always there in our diet. People are going to be missing iodine, right? So I have a blend of 3 organic kelps from Iceland, because Americans often don't get enough iodine, because we're no longer using iodinized salt, which was never a great way to do it. It will cover deficiency, but it's not a fantastic way of getting your iodine levels. So, but in any event, so it's very hard for most Americans to get adequate nutrition. So covering some of these bases just seems really important. And they make a big difference for developing disease in the long term. I mean, it's just been clearly demonstrated 1,000 times in studies.
Yeah. And I love your point of, just that even though you may be eating healthy, quote unquote, the variety and the amount is so minuscule to what you actually really need, for your biology. And especially if you have chronic disease, I mean, that's even more so. The demand is there for your body to have these nutrients to help with the healing process and to help with your condition. So just like having a side salad with your steak or your salmon at dinner, like, doesn't cover it. It's like, that is, sure, that's great, you're having a side salad, but that is not even close. And especially the variety. We as Americans have such a limited diet, like we don't go outside the box, as far as like what we eat. You're talking about the colors, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, I have some broccoli, and maybe I'll have a sweet potato. And that's like the limit of the vegetables that are happening. It's like you're not eating radishes and like all these different colors of things, and bell peppers, and so it's super limited. So most people who say, oh, I eat vegetables, but it's usually like 2 or 3, and then the list stops there, right? So the variety is super important too.
Very important. That makes a huge difference. But when I was talking about the American diet having 12% of their calories from whole plant foods, there have been now a series of studies out of the University of Tehran Medical Sciences Division, which is a very prestigious medical sciences university over there. And they've been looking at what's called the phytochemical index. And the phytochemical index is just what percent of your diet are whole plant foods, right? And they looked at the lowest quartile to the highest quartile, or the lowest 25% of the society to the highest 25%, and all the ones in between. But comparing the highest to the lowest, they had a 91% drop in prediabetes if you had a high amount compared to the low amount. You had a 92% for women with breast cancer. You had a 66% reduction in obesity. You had a 70% reduction in benign breast disease. Basically every time it was beneficial. There wasn't one time that it wasn't. And they've done a series of studies, and it's ongoing today. And there are also studies that are outside of there that showing depression being less and all these other things. Having whole plant foods is a great thing. I'm not saying being vegan or vegetarian. I'm saying whole plant foods can have a really impactful impact on your nutritional journey, right? And so trying in that study, where the highest quartile was, or the highest 25%, really was about 42% of their calories from whole plant foods. And the lowest quartile over there was 14%. So the lowest quartile was higher than our average, just to give you an example.
Yeah, that's pretty stunning. Yeah, we're way behind the power curve when it comes to phytonutrition and micronutrition as Americans. So we've got some serious catching up to do, right?
Absolutely. And you just hit that one word, phytonutrition or phytochemicals. They're just so important. They don't have an RDA, but anthocyanins, spirifane, polyphenols, they're all so important. And if you look at them broken down individually, they have this massive impact on health. So having a lot of nutrition that way is fantastic. Even though it might not have an RDA amount, it still is a really important aspect of health.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. So, most people assume, oh, okay, well, I'll get my standard physical and I get my blood work back and, I'm good on my vitamin D, even though most people are actually vitamin D deficient, but they think if the doctor's not telling them that they're deficient in these nutrients, then they don't need them. Right. But that's not the case.
Yeah. And the thing is a lot of times it's hard to always measure exactly where somebody is. And there are tests. There's a micronutrient test out of Vibrant American. I'm doing a little pilot study to see how impactful doing a daily smoothie is on people's health. And so I've been having it done with this lab called Vibrant America. And they have a very in-depth test with looking at both serum levels as well as white blood cell levels of all the nutrients, all the minerals, all the vitamins, all the antioxidants, the amino acids, fatty acids. So it's very intense. So somebody can get an idea of how they are doing if they want to.
Yeah. So I can't wait to try your SOS Nutrients powder. I'm like totally placing an order today. It looks so amazing. So yeah. So what makes it different than kind of the other products out there?
Well, the key difference is, so there are products that are whole foods. They're getting their nutrition from whole foods, but they're not comprehensive. And there are comprehensive products all over the place, but they're not whole foods. If you look at take almost any like really large major brand and look at their nutrition, and you're going to see things like potassium iodide, zinc gluconate, name any of them. Beta carotene. I know it sounds natural, but if it's listed as beta carotene, it's almost surely synthetic. If it says vitamin C is ascorbic acid, they're almost all, like literally 95% of the supplements out there, if they're comprehensive, are all synthetic. And so that's the major difference is I've really gone out and it's not easy. Finding iodine is not easy, where you can get the amount that you can confidently say that this is how much is in there from a really good source. So I went over, there's a Icelandic company that blends 3 organic kelps. And so it's far away from any industrialized center where it'd be polluted, and far away from Fukushima. And I put that in, and they have it standardized to 3,000 parts per million of iodine. So I'm able to get exactly the amount I want. But these are really, unique companies, and they're handpicked purveyors. Like all these large companies, they wouldn't be able to do it. They just swamp them. There's just not enough available. So that's really the major difference, is that I'm doing something comprehensive. I have 9 different components besides for all the RDA, vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, all the nutrients there, but there's also, I have a full greens blend. I have a full berry blend, and that's made up of organic freeze-dried blend of berries. Like it has all the anthocyanins and, zeaxanthin, lutein. So it's a very in-depth product. Let's just put it that way. And it's a passion project. I'm not doing this to make money. I know it sounds crazy, but I've done other things financially. This has just been something I've been passionate about. And then for my own health and then for others. And now I'm just trying to get it out there.
Yeah. And I mean, you guys have to go to the website, the sosnutrients.com, and check out the ingredients on this daily micronutrient powder. My mind was blown. I could not believe that there is so much packed into this supplement. Not only is the vitamins and minerals that, list very impressive, but you have these targeted botanicals, you have super extracts and nutrients, you have mushroom blends, you've got probiotics, you've got enzymes, you've got super berries, like you mentioned, super seeds, prebiotics, and greens all in one product. I mean, and that's
all
insane.
Efficacious doses. That's the key. The thing is, you can see here, your audience can't, but I have the Magnesium Miracle here in this book, Iodine Crisis, Healing Mushrooms, Vitamin C in Cancer, et cetera, et cetera. Which one do you choose? They're all actually important. So, and then what form do you want it in? You want it in a whole food form. I'm just telling you, there's so much research on that. And it's so rare, and I just don't see that out there, a comprehensive product that's whole form. Now, the one thing is this product is made to be put into a smoothie. So, how I was talking about the University of Tehran studies with phytochemical index, is they were trying to get to 42% of their calories from whole plant foods. When I make a smoothie, which I am drinking right now, I have about 25% of my calories from that in a day. And so now I'm starting right out the gate with 25% of my calories from Rockstar Nutrition, not only just covering that, but then covering all these specific nutrients. So and that's why I'm doing these little pilot studies, because I want to actually demonstrate how much of an impact that can make.
Yeah, that smoothie recipe is so impressive. And the chart that you have on the website that shows just a few nutrients, just comparing just like a smoothie without your whole food blend, and then a smoothie with the SOS blend. And like just the vitamin D is 0. And then with your product, that's 375%. Like the numbers are staggering, just how much you get in just one smoothie.
Well, let me say the reason why it's 375%, I'm not going over just for effect. It's because so many Americans are low in vitamin D. I mean, it sounds like you're very familiar with that. And the thing is there have been studies done by the CDC. One, they did studies to see where the American status of vitamin D. So 95% of Americans were under 35 nanograms per milliliter in the blood. What does that mean? That means that's a level. But if you look at disease, and I have all these studies on it, like if you look at disease, you want to be higher than that, in my opinion. It's just very clear cut in terms of breast cancer and all these other things. So you want to get higher than that when there's very little downside that I see. I don't want to put in huge amounts, but this is, if you want to be somewhere where like the people, the indigenous cultures that are in the sun a lot, and they're at somewhere around, on average, 45 nanograms per milliliter. So to me, being there or even a little bit higher is probably the best thing. And 95% of Americans were under 35, with a huge percent of them under 10, which is just putting them at incredible risk of disease.
Yeah. So the question I always ask is, who needs this? Who needs to be taking this product?
Well, so, it's hard for me to say exactly. Like I could say everybody, But if somebody's in really good health and is really focused on getting their nutrition and is spending the time and effort to really do it, and they're not using deficient foods, and they're getting a good variety, and they're really eating a huge percent of their diet from whole plant foods, and they're really paying a lot of attention to their nutrition, they're probably doing terrific. But the vast majority of people are, I mean, what is it? 97% of Americans don't get enough fiber. Let's start there. Like 97%. And that number, the recommended daily amount for fiber, is about half the amount that an indigenous culture like the Kung Bushmen or the Yanomamo tribe are getting naturally, because everything they eat is whole foods, right? Even though about 20% of their diet is or animal products that don't have any fiber, everything else is. And so they're getting twice the amount, the recommended amount that we do. And yet only 3% of Americans get that. And then you have 97% of Americans don't get enough potassium. 95% don't get enough vitamin D. And I would say it's even less than that. Then you have ascorbic acid or vitamin C, right? You have 40% or 45%, I'm just going off memory, but don't get enough vitamin C. But that's for the recommended amount for men at 90 milligrams and women at 75. But you're still seeing benefit and a protective benefit from heart disease, cancer, and other things over 200 milligrams. So the numbers that you're seeing for the RDA are actually good for preventing deficiency diseases, but are not necessarily the optimal amount for health.
Yeah,
So-
no, that's a really good point. Yeah, the RDA. So for people listening, the recommended daily allowance is the government guidelines for certain vitamins and minerals, right? So, but it is the minimum amount to avoid, deficiency issues. So what's the point Stephen is making is you don't want minimum health, right? You want, I mean, I don't know about you, but I want maximum health. Like I want to
maximum,
be the healthiest.
optimal, any of those
Optimal,
words,
right?
Yeah,
I don't want to be a
exactly.
minimum kind of, healthy person. So, just keep that in mind when you see these, these guidelines, is that, to go above that is not a bad thing. It's just looking at the number is just like the minimum to avoid chronic, health issues because of these deficiencies. So there is mention, and I was really interested in this, of how, the SOS Nutrients powder has changed some of your customers' lives. Do you have any like a story you'd like to share about an experience that somebody may have had with your product?
Sure, there are actually a bunch, but the one that there's a guy that I was introduced to. His name is Forrest Galante, and he's the host of Animal Planet and Discovery Channel, and he looks like a Greek god. He's 34 years old, and he's just in great health. He gave me an okay to say this, right? And I was introduced to him, and I said, "Hey, I'm doing a study. I'd really like you to be involved in it. Would you be open to doing some blood tests and having a smoothie while you're here, and then doing having another blood test and see what the results are? I don't expect that much because you're kind of the epitome of health, but let's just see." And he's like, "Absolutely, sign me up." So I actually brought him a smoothie. I actually brought him 3 smoothies at a time, twice a week. So he had 6 smoothies a week when he was in town. It ended up only being for 5.5 weeks. And he was really good about having them. He just said, "I'm enjoying them." He's like, "I don't care about the taste," even though I tried to make them really taste good, which I think they do. But he said, "Make them any way you want because I don't care," which is fantastic. But so he had a level of inflammation marked by something called C-reactive protein. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Basically, it's a very good, it's an overall marker for inflammation systemically through the body. And his number was 10.9. And you're supposed to be under 1. And that is meaning you've got major inflammation. So if you have inflammation like that, and if you look at the studies on what does that mean for heart disease and things like that? That's increasing your risk by about tenfold for a heart attack. So after 5.5 weeks, because he ended up taking off to Australia and Africa, so we only had 5.5 weeks, but he had this really amazing smoothie for 5.5 weeks. It went from 10.9 to 1.6, a drastic result. Still not under 1, but it was a huge amount there. He went from pre-diabetic of 5.7 on an A1C scale, which is just the very bottom of the pre-diabetic. But he went down to a 5.0. That is a that is a rock star blood sugar, right? So he went from pre-diabetic to fantastic blood sugar. Then I did a whole oxidative stress, which basically is a measurement of how your antioxidants are doing. And he started out in complete oxidative debt. There's something called F2 isoprostane, which is basically a measure of lipid oxidation. And there's another one called 8-OHDG, which is a level of DNA damage. And basically, the one dropped by 52% and the other dropped by 65%, which shows a drastic improvement in oxidative stress. So he had a fantastic result across the board. Now, I wasn't expecting that. One, he's young and healthy. I don't understand why he had so many things out like that. I didn't ask him to change anything. We just did a smoothie every day. But I've had other results. They're not going to be as drastic. Some of them actually have been, but most are not going to be. But this is an incredible amount of nutrition that somebody like that is getting. So that is one of the results that I've seen.
That's incredible. That's huge. Yeah. And like, and I love that you use that story, because I think the misnomer and misunderstanding for a lot of people is that, oh, if I'm not obese, maybe I'm carrying a few extra pounds, but if I'm not obese, or, I don't have, these chronic conditions, then, oh, I'm healthy. And what a lot of people do is just wait until they get that diagnosis, right? Or that bad news from the doctor, or those blood work results, and then try and figure out how to do something about it. But then, of course, the traditional medical model doesn't offer any kind of really any advice as far as nutritionally what you could do for your condition. It's really more just about, okay, here's a prescription, and we'll check up on you in a month. So can you just kind of hit home with how you don't have to wait until you're chronically ill, although most people probably listening, unfortunately, statistically, are chronically ill. But even if you're not, this kind of supplementation is a preventative for you, or maybe even addressing something that's going on that may not be flagged right now medically, but could result in a pretty serious diagnosis down the road.
Yeah. Well, there's just so much that people can do for preventing chronic disease, right? And all of my products are going to be aimed at preventing chronic disease, or the current ones that I'm doing. I'm coming out with products that will be actually used to support, like, say, blood sugar. So already a lot of those nutrients are in this product. So for blood sugar, right, support. But I would put it being directed, and I would have additional things and more of it. So that's for specifically somebody that has blood sugar. And then I have a product coming out specifically for hypertension. And then you're talking about basically trying to prevent anything else from happening, because you're getting all this massive amount of nutrition, but you're also targeting it. And that's what I did for my psoriasis. I mean, essentially, you're not supposed to be able to cure psoriasis, right? But if you are willing to do the effort, and I probably am going to come out with a product for that, but it's so intense to do that. It's not just, you get a little bit of nutrition. You also have to take a bunch of things. You have to remove things from your diet. So in any event, but there's so much that we can do. It just takes something to really make these things happen. But the vitality and your immunity goes up so much. I think it's very well worth it.
Yeah. And the hope, I guess, is that, and you make it so easy, right? I mean, it's not like you're having to take like 30 different supplements, like literally, like if you've got everything in, your powder, you would have to take all these pills and supplements, and you'd just be like constantly doing that all day. And who has time for that, right? You make it so easy. It's literally one smoothie.
Exactly.
And I mean, everybody has time for that, right?
Yeah, but well, the thing is not everybody makes a smoothie, but if somebody is willing to do that, because it does take a little bit of, like, first they have to get the mindset, because they have to get other things to put in it. But if they do that, the advantages, the amount of nutrition, even if they didn't do my product and they made a smoothie, it'd be helpful, right? But if they add this, now all of a sudden they have mushrooms that are just fantastic for you. They have the vitamin D that people are pretty much across the board missing. It has the fiber. I mean, it's just like, it takes a really good smoothie and makes it life-changing. And so to me, there's so many things that are happening that if somebody is willing to make that step, it's really impactful. I'm trying to come up with a guarantee. Like, I'll basically guarantee, if somebody's committed to doing this for 3 months, and we'll take their blood numbers, and I'll tell them where it's going to be, or less or more, depending on which direction it needs to go. And then in 3 months, we'll meet again. And as long as they do it, I'll guarantee that they're going to get there. It's just a matter of them being consistent about it. You need to do it 5 or 6 times a week. It doesn't need to be done every day. This is whole food. It's not like you have to have it every single day, but having it 5 or 6 times a week and mixing up what's with it. And now you've taken an amazingly healthy habit and you've just really put it on steroids.
Yeah. And I love it that you have super helpful, delicious. I mean, I can't wait to try these recipes on your website. They look so good. Like, I mean, I would not be mad at having one of those every day and getting the health benefits from it. But they all look so delicious. So thank you for putting those recipes on the website. I can't wait to start making some.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I'm glad you're going to try it out. And just so you know, there is a military and first responders discount. So, so I'm going to be sending that over to you, so you'll have that.
Yes. So check that out in the show notes. Thank you for doing that. Very much appreciate it for our veterans and first responders who are listening. And I'll be taking advantage of that discount. I'm going to order that and give it a try, and let you know what I think. And I can't wait to give it a try. So Stephen, thank you so much for being on the Warrior Wellness Podcast. I learned a lot, and I can't wait to try your superfood powder.
Terrific. Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey guys, thanks so much again for joining us on another episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast. Please make sure to subscribe, follow, like, all that good stuff on your favorite podcast platform and on our YouTube channel. Go ahead and leave us a review while you're there. And if you screenshot your review, email it to info@fireteamwhiskey.com with your name and address. You'll be entered into our drawing for a prize for just leaving us a review. So let us know what we're doing great, what you'd like to hear more about, and please go ahead and just give us a follow and give us a honest review, especially on iTunes, because that helps us reach other military members, veterans, and first responders with this vitally important information about how to improve their health, fitness, and wellness. We will see you at the next episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast. I am your podcast host, former Army Captain Stephanie Lincoln, founder of Fire Team Whiskey.